All right, welcome everyone to the Adherent Apologetics show, where we talk all things regarding Christianity, atheism, and all kinds of other beliefs. Today I am with Randolf Richardson. If you do not know who Randolph is, he is the president of the Canadian Atheists. He's also one of the nicest people and shows the truth that Canadians are probably the nicest people in the world. Randolph, how are you doing?
Wow, that's a fantastic introduction. Thank you, Zach. I assure you the feeling's mutual. I really enjoy dealing with you as well. We had a debate in Modern Day Debate a while ago, it was last year or year before, and a conversation broke out. So I thought it was quite pleasant, quite a pleasant interaction. I really enjoyed it, and I'm just really delighted to be on your show today. This is this is kind of like an honor to be part of all of this and to have your interest. So thank you very much. Yeah, we've got some rainy weather here, if you're asking how it's going. So the air is fresh. So I hope that means I'm thinking clearly today.
Well, maybe I can take advantage of your non-clearing thinking. Not at all, actually. So for those of you who do not know my interactions with Randolph in the past, this is not going to be some sort of heavy debate where we go at each other for the next 80 minutes. It's going to be a more casual conversation. I'm coming into this trying to learn about Randolph, what he believes. He's going to hopefully just be doing the same. And it's going to be a lighthearted, but we're going to talk about some of the issues and questions. Yeah, that's going to be basically it. So if you want to talk a little bit, just to start off, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, kind of like what the Canadian Atheists are, things like that.
Certainly. My name is Randolf Richardson. I am a Canadian. I was born here. All my life I've never believed in any deities, so I've always been an atheist. And I recently, about 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, I'm not quite remembering the exact date, I founded the Canadian Atheists because I want to normalize atheism in society. We do pretty good here in Canada already, but I have kind of noticed there have been some people who have been working a little bit against that, and I see it in their attempts to vilify us unfairly. So I'm trying to be the voice that counters that, not trying to stop people from doing it, but just trying to be a voice that counters it, so that people will hopefully think twice before doing something like that. Because I want it to be where when somebody says they believe in a god or any number of deities, where the response is normal, that atheists receive the same kind of response when we tell people we don't believe in any deities. I'd just like it to be normal for everybody this way, because I believe that personal beliefs that people have everyone's entitled to whatever they want to believe, and we should definitely be supporting that.
Yeah, so what is kind of the goal behind the Canadian Atheists when you created the Canadian Atheists? What's the purpose of it?
Well, we are very concerned about people's rights to associate with a group or to not associate with a group, and people's rights to freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of opinion, and all these sorts of things, which I think are mutually beneficial to everybody. Overall, these things I believe are very good for society, because when people are free to question and free to believe and free to explore different ideas, the end result, and free to debate ideas, no matter how contentious they are, the end result is that we come to better understandings in the long run, and we can all enjoy the benefits of greater progress. So these are the kind, in a way, indirectly, I'm working for that. But one of our main goals is to normalize atheism, normalize not believing in deities, and normalize and counter the vilification efforts which are unfairly put forth.
Okay, so talk just a little bit about, because people can describe being an atheist as different things. What does it mean to you that you are an atheist?
Well, to me, it means that I don't believe in any deities. It doesn't mean that I have justification for it. If I have justification for that, that is a separate matter that's incidental to it. It could be skepticism, it could be a belief, or it could be even formed on a disdain for the idea. Some people are like that. For me, I just don't happen to have a belief. I don't have a justification for it. It's just the way I am. But because I believe very much in the freedom of things, the freedom to believe things or not. So, I take that very literally. So there are people who do define the phrase differently, and it is a polysemist word. So there are different definitions of it that come along. One of the most common ones is conflated with an anti-theistic position that there are no deities, and that is a claim that does carry a burden of proof or an onus of justification is the more academic term for it, in my view. And because when somebody is making a claim, if you want other people to take it seriously, then you have to be willing to satisfy your onus of justification, if you will. So the anti-theist, by saying there isn't one, also does carry that burden. Now, one of the common things that comes up with a lot of these different variants on what people mean by atheism is the underlying characteristic that is consistent with all of them is not believing in deities. And that's what I'm focused on, is just that. Right. Another example of one that comes up from time to time is that atheists hate God, and that would be a mesotheism, meso being the prefix for hatred. And so that's another one that that's not me. I have no reason to have a hatred for something I don't believe in.
All right, awesome. So I'm curious, you talked a little bit in the beginning about how you've never had some sort of belief in God. So did you or a deity, did you grow up in like an atheist household? Like what was kind of like the religious or lack of any religious environment that you lived in growing up?
Yeah, so my parents, my dad is a skeptic. He has a background in psychology and also takes a great interest in science and science fiction. My mom is more on the musical side, working in the industry of music education for quite a long time in the academic level. I found out after I moved out of the home that she actually does take some kind of vague belief in a Christian-like deity. So I classify her at least as Gnostic, Gnostic. But I think she's not very strong in her belief on that. But my parents did tell me afterwards that they decided it would be best that we grow up without any kind of bias in any direction on this kind of thing, and make our own mind up on this at some point if we wanted to, which I of course don't have any problem with. I think that's quite a fair and an honest approach toward it.
Yeah. Okay. So did you ever have a time in your life where you considered taking some sort of form of a religious belief or anything along those lines, or would you say pretty confidently that you've always been an atheist and that's kind of like your journey until this point?
I have been invited a number of times to join these different kinds of religions and not just Christianity, but it just never appealed to me. What I would see would be people who were, it almost looked like some of them were having seizures. They were praying so hard, I guess you could say. And that kind of activity, it kind of spooked me out a little bit, and I just didn't feel comfortable being part of that, and so I didn't continue on with it. I just never really got into it. So I wasn't closed off to it, if that's kind of what you're wondering. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's
I just didn't feel a need to get into it. So.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So did you have any sort of like Christian influences, or not to say influences, but like what was your exposure to Christianity as you were growing up, through high school, through if you went to college, things like that, and as an adult? Like, what have you had, like Christian friends, Christian coworkers, anything along those lines? Like, what's your exposure to Christianity kind of been like as you've grown up?
My exposure has been that, I kind of knew it was there, but like here in Canadian culture, religion is mostly, it's not projected publicly by people very much. People usually consider their religion, their religious beliefs, to be more of a private matter here, and it's quite common. So I wasn't really around people who were pushing it on me. There were people I do have friends who are Christians. I have some who are Muslims. I have friends of different religions, and they know who I am and on this, but it's not an issue. There's I did have one friend for a while who maybe about 10 years ago, and we used to play table tennis together regularly. And after about a year and a half of it, he just one day started asking me, "Are you do I believe in God?" And so, of course, I just said, "No, I don't," because it never came up before. And then he started getting a little upset about this. And so, what happened the next day? I found that there was a place that we go that was common. So I go in, and he was just leaving, and then I was only there for less than a minute, and I come out, and the tires on my vehicle had been slashed. So and he was not happy with me. He wasn't even saying hello that day. He was just not, and normally it would be like, "Good morning, hello, how are you?" Right? So I did contact the police about it, and they talked to him, and so things got sorted out, and it turned out that he was actually quite mad about the fact that he didn't know all this time that I didn't believe in God like him. Now, these situations are, in my experience, extremely rare. You get people from kind of all walks of life who do some pretty terrible things. I can think of an example from the atheism community, someone I don't know, but who's been in the news recently, Craig Hicks, who committed murder. And he's in prison for it now in the US. I don't know if you're familiar with the case, but he killed 3 young Muslim girls because it was a dispute over a parking space. A lot of people like to frame that as being that he's an anti-theist, and he was very strong and vocal about it on Facebook and places like that. But my point being that there are good people, mostly, I find, in all these communities, and there are a few bad apples as well, and it's unfortunate. And I think one of the big mistakes that comes up is that people will often see one bad person in the community and then try to paint the whole community with the same brush. And that's problematic because it's not objective. It's unfair to all the people who are in the community who are not like that. And like I wouldn't consider that you would do anything like this, because you don't seem to be that kind of person at all. You seem very nice. And and I know you to be a real nice guy. But yeah, so the influence I've had, I would say the majority of the people I've known over the years who are religious and still know are nice people. Mm-hmm. And I just, it's not, just because they're nice is not a reason why I will copy and do the same thing. I will more think for myself on it. But yeah, there wasn't really a strong influence here to saying that I should be a Christian or I should be any other particular religion. So like I say, coworkers and schoolmates are all, you know, there are a number who are religious and others are not. And the majority, we just don't know because it doesn't come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, I find it interesting, the Canadian religious climate, where it seems like, at least for you guys, religion's almost more of a internal, like, kind of like it stays in the home type thing. I think that's really interesting. I think you bring up a really good point about how I think there's people who, on whatever, with every belief, there's people who will do terrible things, like the murder you were talking about. And I think it's important that when an atheist commits a murder, or a Christian does, or a Muslim or a Jew, we don't automatically assume, see, they're all terrible people, because it's not true.
Right.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing I think to be transitional, because I'd love to talk with you for a little bit about why you lack a belief in a God or a deity. So the first thing you talked about, is you talked about this idea that most people, and I'm thankful that you consider myself a good person. Mm-hmm. So when you call someone good, what do you mean by good?
I mean that what you seem to value as good, being cordial with people, being polite, you seem to be the type of person, I'm impressed that you're the type of person who would probably help somebody if they were having trouble in the street. Somebody had fallen down and gotten hurt. You're likely the type of person who would try to help them up or call for help or something if needed. Am I judging you correctly on that?
Yeah, you are. I mean, I don't know how much of a help I'll be. I'm not the
no.
medically inclined. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm just, yeah.
My general sense is that you and I very likely share a lot of the same values. And we share, we may have different reasons for it, but we probably have a lot of the same values, where we want to see things improve in society. We favor the well-being of people in general, and all these kinds of things. With the organization that you started, Adherent Apologetics, hope I'm saying that right, is my assumption is that your intentions are you're very well intended in that, and you want to be encouraging people to do good things in society. And this is something that's very important. We need more of this kind of thing in society. So just like with us, with Canadian atheists, we definitely want to encourage people to think about what they're doing before they do it, and hopefully do things that are lawful. And one of the things that I do for determining if I'm doing something ethical or moral is like if it's something that's going to impact other people, I'll think about a variety of things. I'll consider John Rawls' theory of justice, his idea of the veil of ignorance, which is mainly intended for lawmakers, but it is something that will that certainly I've found to be helpful in determining what's moral. It considers, like, I'll give you the example in the veil of ignorance being applied in the situation of law. If you're drafting a law, the idea is you wear this metaphorical veil of ignorance, which means that once the law is enacted, you won't know what your role will be in society. It will be randomly assigned. You could be any person in society. You could be rich or poor. You could be male or female. Your sexual orientation could be different than what the majority is. There could be all kinds of different factors. You could be any race. You could have a disability. You could be in a family that's the result of a whole bunch of lawsuits that are unfair. It could be, you could end anything. So the idea is that you think about how this law is going to impact all these different people in society, and then try to write the law in the most fair way that everybody can enjoy an equal benefit from it. And then that way it's a law that's truly helpful to everyone. So considering this kind of thinking is what I do when I'm stuck with something that I have to determine, is this a good thing? Is this a right or wrong thing? And then I try to make the determination the best one I can on my own. Sometimes I'll consult with my peers for that as well and ask them. And my peers will include not just atheists, but all my friends, of course. Of course, there's also the legal system, and an important distinction is that just because it's the law doesn't necessarily mean it's ethical or moral. In most cases, I think that's generally the idea, but it isn't always the case. Like, for example, a country that has the death penalty for crimes, I'm against that. I think that that's wrong. I think that the way that it should be framed is that it would be a life sentence with a minimum time served, and then any point after that, there could be an option for that person to take a death penalty, but it has to be their choice. The consent has to be theirs. Whereas here in Canada, we don't have the death penalty, so we don't even have this freedom. So, but I do, there's stuff like that. I have a difference of opinion than I know a lot of Americans have, because I know there's many Americans and even many Canadians who are in favor of the death penalty. So yeah, there's different views on what's good and what's bad, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's not an objective moral thing that's just consistent everywhere in the world.
Yeah, I mean, we may disagree on the idea of objective morality. There's a couple things I want to look at you about. So I'm guessing you're a moral subjectivist, where you can't say something is objectively right or wrong. Am I correct in that view?
Sure, but I'll clarify a point. If you and I can agree on a certain moral principle, then it's possible for us to make a non-subjective determination about whether an action is moral based on that. So we can make objective determinations, but you're right. I would say morality is definitely a subjective thing. So,
trying to understand what you just said a little bit more. So,
okay.
if does it have to be like a unanimous decision that if something is if me and you and the entire world decides, for example, stealing is wrong, would it become objective then if that stealing is wrong?
No, it would be the whole world agrees, but within the consideration of what the whole world agrees on, then an objective determination can be made about an act of theft being wrong. That doesn't mean it is the case, though, without all of us agreeing on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I think
views can change too.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm interested in, you're talking about a little bit in your moral framework, or I don't know exactly what you call it, but how you determine if an action is right or an action is wrong. One of the things you brought up was the idea that we should be, when we decide if something should be considered right, we should consider all people in that decision. Is that correct?
That's a tough one. It's hard for me to give a black and white answer on that one. It's a gray area. What happens now is the majority of people are considered as far as lawmaking is concerned. At least that's supposed to be the case, and so I think if you're in with a group of a bunch of people deciding that something is right or wrong, the peer pressure factors and whatnot are definitely going to play a role, and there's something that people allude to sometimes, especially in the debates, where if the whole world thought 1 + 1 was 3, they would all still be wrong. See, we kind of venture into the bandwagon fallacy here, and it's an important warning to us that we should really think carefully about what we are doing. If the whole populace was not properly educated on this kind of thought of justice and whatnot, except for one person, and that one person did actually come up with a better solution than what the majority was thinking, majority could still make the wrong decision. In their minds, it will be the right decision. But the reality is it could actually be the wrong decision, right? Yeah.
Well, how do you determine that it's the wrong decision? Like, is that just like a subjective, like the majority of people outside of those people?
It's subjective for sure. Again, I have to look at the facts of a particular situation and make my own determination on it. And that's how it is. And very often I'll defer to somebody I trust, or I'll defer to the legal system. And if somehow there is a point being raised or something doesn't sit well with it, then it's worth re-examination, I think. Most of the time people just go along with it and it seems to be okay. And, for all I know, the Canadian legal system could be entirely wrong and entirely unethical. And I could be completely wrong on all of this. So. Yeah. Okay. So I have no problem admitting that.
I appreciate your honesty. I think it's really, it's great to see. Just for everyone who's listening, kind of like a rough schedule as we continue this conversation. So we're going to be talking about things related to like the existence of a God for probably about another 15 minutes or so. And then we're going to transition to Christianity for about 25, 30 minutes-ish. And then we'll do some closing thoughts on how to improve communication. If you have questions or anything, you can put those in the live chat. We'll answer those at the end. And that's kind of like a rough framework. And I didn't tell Randolph any of this, so he's learning this as well right now. But that's kind of like the idea of what's going to go down, so that just so you guys know. I'm trying to think about we can talk about this whole idea of morality for forever, basically.
It goes on forever. There's always counterexamples available, and that's the problem with anything being subjective.
Yeah. I think you could debate anything for like hours.
Yeah.
Question for you. I kind of think I know how you're going to answer this, but I think it's a good question for people who are listening, especially for Christians who may not be familiar with how an atheist would answer this question. So do you consider what the Nazis did with the Holocaust and the extermination of Jews and disabled people and things along those lines, do you consider that wrong?
I do think that's wrong. I think that they were committing genocide, and I'm against genocide. I think genocide is definitely an arbitrary decision. They're saying, and that's unfair to people because each person is individual and we have different views on things and different approaches and attitudes to things and to life in general. So I definitely disagree with what the Nazis did.
Okay, so
and most of the atheists I know think it's horrible as well.
Yeah, I can't think of really any atheist that would say that the Nazis did a good thing. I can't think of really any people in general who would say that the Nazis did a good thing. A couple of things I'm curious on. So how do you look at someone who, let's say like an Adolf Hitler or some of the people underneath him who thought that they were doing a good thing because they were with this conquest and genocide of these people, they were helping further their people, the Germans and Austrians and other people in that area. So if they thought what they were doing was good, in a sense, since they're benefiting their people, is it good for them that they did that? Because that's like their moral convictions. If they thought they were doing what's best for their people, therefore that would be good in their eyes. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Okay. This will get a little extensive, I think,
Yeah.
because the history, as I understand it, is Adolf Hitler got elected because he appealed to the younger audience, the younger demographic, who were angry with a lot of them were frustrated or angry with how the older demographic, the aging demographic, had mishandled things, and they were not satisfied with how life was going. And so he figured out that how to appeal to that, and his presentations were kind of in an angry tone. So that would have appealed to them because of the things he was saying. He knew how to be an effective leader. I don't think he was a good leader, but he was an effective one. And to be fair, he did bring in things like the viaduct to Germany, which has been tremendously beneficial to them, the economy and everything else there for ever since. But he also did some very bad things. And my understanding also was that he didn't initially start off with this whole anti-Jewish idea. And that came later on in his career. And when he, I guess, was comfortable enough that he had enough influence that he'd be able to rule things without being questioned too much and run it like a dictatorship. So it's after that point. So it was years later, as I understand, that he started getting into that. And then the racist things came out. And by that time, he had already gotten a lot of people convinced to follow him and do just about anything he said, because he was a very strong personality by the looks of it. And it's sad because a lot of people will follow a leader without questioning them. They will follow blindly. And quite often, a lot of people will look up to someone as their leader as somebody who they dare not question, because the last thing they want is the wrath of that leader coming down on them. And in the case with Adolf Hitler, a lot of them knew very well, I think, that had they resisted his direction or his ideas, when it came to very extreme ideas, that he was likely to put them to death or do something that would really be an awful thing for them and their family, because that's how they play. They'd go after family members as well, you know. So I think a lot of them were just following so loyally. There are probably a number of different reasons. Some of them could have done it out of fear, some of it because they knew what the repercussions would potentially be. Others could have done it just because they're blindly following and they're, so to speak, drinking the Kool-Aid. And so there's likely other reasons too. I think if you're ever talking with a social psychologist, they could probably give you a lot more detail on what the dynamics, their interpersonal dynamics there, that would have influenced them. And that might actually be quite an interesting episode to watch if you ever did manage to get that going. So yeah, it's not an area of expertise for me, but that's my general understanding. And so a lot of people will just follow orders, or they'll say, oh, the upper echelon said it, so no point questioning it. We'll just follow. We're just following orders. You hear the excuse, and it can be quite dangerous, because if the orders are wrong, then, you know, shouldn't there be some kind of recourse for people to say, hey, I have a problem with this, to speak up and say, have the leadership considered this aspect of this, because this could actually be wrong. I think it's wrong, and here's why, and not have to worry about repercussions that could potentially be lethal for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, I have one kind of thought that I was thinking about this, because you seem like the kind of guy, and you're a great guy, who advocates or believes that it's important that humans are protected, right? That humans deserve, I don't know if you want to call them their rights, but they deserve a chance to be like free, things like liberty, things like that. You know, I'm guessing you would agree with that.
Oh, definitely. And here in Canada, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is part of our Constitution, protects under Section 2 freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, and other things like that. Freedom of religion is also protected. And then Section 15 of our Charter forbids discrimination against people based on all these factors.
Okay. So I'm curious.
I agree with that. I think it's correct.
Yeah. So I'm curious, as an atheist, obviously we can make assumptions, and obviously I assume as an atheist, if I'm wrong, please tell me. I'm assuming you're pro-choice on the whole abortion debate.
I am. I am pro-choice on because I'm pro-freedom. I'm pro-choice not because I'm an atheist. Atheism is incidental to that. I do know atheists who are who take the opposite view and are entirely against abortion. And for me, my view on it is that it is the freedom for a pregnant person to make the choice at any time, and to make sure that it is a freedom. And what that characterizes it as a freedom is that they're not being pressured to change their choice on it. And the kind of pressures I'm talking about would be where they're required to justify their decision.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not free if they have to justify it.
Yeah. So I think we're a little bit off track here. I think this is an interesting thing because we've been talking a lot about like what does a human deserve, human rights, human liberties, things like that. And obviously, as not necessarily just because I'm a Christian, because I believe that humans have value. I obviously would disagree with you on this point because I believe that unborn baby from the moment of conception has value. Part of it's that they're made in the image of God, at least in my beliefs. But I think also part of it's just they're just humans. I think even if I was an atheist, I'd still have a hard time taking a pro-choice position. So I'm curious.
And many do.
Yeah,
some do. Some do. Yeah, I'll say some do. I know for sure some do. Yeah, and I'm not surprised that's your position.
So I'm curious because I feel like there has to in this whole question there has to be a line drawn somewhere. So, for example, I think it's wrong for me to freely choose to kill you, Randolph. And I would never do that. You are an awesome guy.
Oh, good. I judged you correctly. Yeah, that's splendid.
Secretly, there's actually a whole team coming to your house while I distract you with this live stream.
Oh, that's what this is about. Okay. You're wondering where I draw the line.
Okay. So I would say that in the same way that I cannot kill you, I don't believe that a human can kill an unborn baby, because I think really the only difference between a baby in the womb and someone like me or you is obviously our age and our location. So how do you draw the line? Why? I'm assuming you don't believe it's okay to freely kill me or someone like that, but you believe that you can
that would be murder.
Kill or terminate or something like that. Pregnancy. So where do you draw the line on that debate?
So for me, it's once it's after birth, after umbilical separation, and that's when the baby becomes a human. It becomes a person, and is protected by the rights of the law. Before then, it is a part of the pregnant person's body, and so it's up to the pregnant person to make that decision. So that's my view on it. So umbilical separation is the key point there.
Okay, and obviously we could get into this debate for forever, but that's not the purpose of this live stream. I want to ask you one more question here, and if you feel free, don't feel like if you have anything you want to ask me, feel free to do it. But I'm curious. So, I just don't want to talk about abortion for the next hour because there's a lot of topics to address.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
This short live stream. You're so sweet. This is why you are awesome. So, my question is, my nieces, they were born, or they weren't born. It was a C-section, 2 months premature. So, in your view, if they were, let's say that they weren't born premature, and that the mother of my nieces decided that they were still in the womb at 7 months instead of being born premature, that she just decided that they were able to, she still would have the right to terminate that pregnancy if they were still unborn, so to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Let's move on.
Straightforward answer. It's just so. What comes up is there are different motivations for people being anti-abortion, and the reasons vary. So one of the motivations that I'm concerned about one of the outcomes that I'm concerned about is that we have these freedoms. We are the freedom of personal liberty to be able to make our own decisions about our own bodies. If a pregnant person is told that they can't terminate the pregnancy, then their rights to personal liberty have been compromised, have been restricted. And that's not freedom anymore. And that's where I'm coming from on this. And that's kind of why I look at it this way. I see it as tantamount to enslaving pregnant people just because they're pregnant, just because of a health condition. So anyway, that's my straightforward view on that for you. It's not meant to excite anybody or to cause offense. It's just you asked how I view it, and there it is.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty, and I think for the sake of time, we'll move on here to another topic. So talk about more reason that people propagate to believe in God. I don't really have any specific argument in mind. There's a lot we could go through, cosmological, fine-tuning. There's all kinds of fun stuff. What is there one kind of argument for the existence of God that you'd love to, for me, that you've looked into a lot, that you're curious about talking about here for a few minutes before we transition to Christianity?
Not really. I think, again, it comes down to there's a lot of different reasons people believe things. And there are, I guess one kind of thing comes up is that there's this idea that everything was created by one God. And there are, the question that I come up is why would you believe it's just one? Why not multiple deities working together as a team to do all this? Because creating the universe is a pretty enormous task, I would think. It's just a kind of a thought that comes up sometime. Why is it just one? Why is it not multiple?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that question a little bit. I think that if you look in I think the question comes down to is, what do you mean by when you're talking about God? So I think the idea of multiple deities kind of working together is kind of like almost a polytheistic framework of understanding things. And at least me personally, I have a hard time believing, like when I talk about God, who I believe in a being that's all powerful, all knowing, all the alls and omnis and all that stuff. And are you there? I think you froze.
Hello.
Okay,
I'm here.
You there? Did you hear what I said?
Then it. Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Do you hear me? Oh my gosh.
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me? If you guys are in the live chat, who can you not hear right now? Is it Randolph or me that you are struggling to hear? This is a bummer.
I think you're coming through now.
Okay. I'm not sure whose audio is cutting out, if it's me or you. You hear me? Hello?
Gummies.
You hear me?
Hi there.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, someone in the chat said it's your internet, Randolph. I don't know.
Okay.
If you guys can hear me,
everything's
well, but I think we're good now. Where did we cut off?
Okay. Sorry about that. You were talking about the omnis. So you mentioned polytheism.
Okay. Yeah. So I believe obviously in a God that's omnipresent, omnipotent, all those things we could talk about. And I think these polytheistic gods are really none of these. Most of these beings are created beings, and I believe that if we're going to talk about God, at least the God that I believe in, the God, if there is a God, I think monotheism is the only solution that makes sense. And I think that a polytheistic framework fails where you have like a bunch of gods working together because there's no creator. You have a bunch of limited beings created things, whereas God is an unlimited being who created things. I hope I'm answering your question well, so you understand where I'm coming from on that.
It seems that you're thinking because they're polytheistic, they can't be omnipower. They can't be omnipotent or omniscient.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able because they're limited. If you look at the gods in Hinduism or Buddhism or anything, they're limited in their powers and abilities and their knowledge and all these things. And I think when we talk about 2,000 or so deities that have been proposed by man, most of those deities are polytheistic, with the exception of a Christian view or an Islamic view or a Judaism view, or there's a few African views that are monotheistic, but the vast majority are polytheistic beings that are typically created, at least from my understanding. I haven't looked into this as like a scholar or anything.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, I was curious why you would think that. So yeah, I don't know if I can get on board with the idea that under polytheism that one or more deities couldn't be all powerful and all knowing. But I guess that's a conversation for another time, because we've got a time frame to work on here. So
yeah. I mean, that's definitely an interesting.
But I know your reason. But I know what your reason is now. So thank you for that.
This is an interesting discussion. That's something I'd love to talk about at a future time, but unfortunately, time is not my friend right now. So let's talk a little bit about, or actually before we get into that, I'm curious. So what would convince you, let's say that like a Judeo-Christian God or an Islam, like a monotheistic, all-powerful, all-knowing being, what would convince you that some sort of being of that type exists? Kind of the last question here before we transition to like Christianity and your thoughts on that.
I actually do have an answer for that. There was a challenge that I put onto the internet, and I'm just going to send you a link to it in Twitter real quick here, so that you can take a look yourself. And there's an image there if you wanted to put it up on the screen. I'll just read it quickly to you if you like. I'm basically saying that to prove that a deity is real, all that deity would need to do is to grant me omniscience and omnipotence for about a week or so that I could verify it all for myself. You know, I'd use that, of course, to explore the universe, maybe the cosmos and whatnot. And there it is. That's the one. So yeah, that's what I've put forth for people. Now, what I find is an interesting response to that is a lot of people have tried to negotiate down the amount of time I would need instead of taking other avenues. So, and I find that quite interesting. But yeah, it is one that that would do it for me, I think, because then that way I would have the firsthand chance to try it myself. One person suggested, "Oh, well, then you would destroy God." I said, "Okay, I'd be willing to put on a restriction that I wouldn't be able to destroy God." and then they still weren't happy with it. But you know, it's I have like for me, I would be actually quite happy to explore the entire universe. And what's interesting I found about this too was the responses I received. Some people said they'd like to come along for the ride and see as well.
I would.
It ends up getting into science fiction, right? So almost the idea seems like that. But this is the kind of level of proof I would need. And although it might sound flippant, I have challenged quite a few theists to do, including Christians, to actually make the arrangements to make this happen. So that's where it is for me. I would need the firsthand experience on it. Okay.
So do you think there's, as I'm trying to wrap up this whole portion, I'm just curious on your thoughts. Is there any sort of like, do you think there's some sort of like argument that could convince you, or is it just kind of like that challenge that you put on Twitter is like kind of like the end all be all and what would convince you of the existence of God?
Yeah. And I'm interested to know what you think of that challenge at some point. You don't have to tell me today. You probably want to think it over for a while. But I'm certainly not close to there being an argument that could convince me. But I have not encountered one yet that has convinced me. So when an argument does come forth, I will do my best to apply critical thinking on the matter.
Okay. So let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about Christianity for a little bit. And I'm curious, just give me your general thoughts on the question of if you believe, I don't know, because I really know nothing about your beliefs here. Did Jesus exist? And if so, who was Jesus in your perspective?
I don't have a position on it. If like what I know of what's been said of him is that he has a background in carpentry, and there's various things that have been said about his character, and that he was resurrected at one point, and various other things. I just don't hold a position on whether he was really a deity who was real. You know, it's as far as being a person in history, I also don't know, because I don't know enough about that part of history. So I have to defer to experts on that one. And the problem is that there are experts with so many different views on it that it's okay. So it's going to take quite a lot of work to look into that and determine which ones are correct. And again, because it's so far in history, I don't even know if it was accurately recorded, which is a whole other area that people talk about as well, like how accurate was the recording of what happened. And there's some people who say, well, it's a combination of a number of different people of the time coming together and amalgamated into the story of a single person. There's also other people who point out that religions before Christianity had similar stories, and so maybe it was adapted or plagiarized. These kinds of things come up. So there's a lot of different kind of loose ends, I guess, from what I see. So I don't know which position to take on it. So I haven't made a determination on it, is what it boils down to for me.
Okay, so
I'm trying to be fair here.
Yeah, no, all I want is your honesty. I'm not here
and I don't mean to like Christianity on this at all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're good, man. So on a scale, now I'm going to give you an option to get out of this scale if you want. I don't want to force you into answering a question that you don't have an answer to. But from, let's just say 10 is Jesus definitely exists, 1 is Jesus definitely did not exist. Where are you on this scale? Or you could just say you don't have a position on this.
I don't have a position on. Yeah. I don't have a position on it.
Okay, so
Jesus is a deity, and I don't believe that deities do or don't exist.
Okay, let's forget about the idea that Jesus is God for a second, and just like the historical Jesus, like there was a person who walked the earth whose name was Jesus of Nazareth, who is the person talked about in the Bible. It doesn't have to mean that he did everything the Bible says, but that's just like that figure existed. Does your answer change that scale at all?
I could go so far to say, yeah, certainly it's possible, I guess. I'm not really taking a hard position on it, but I would certainly say that, like, if it's excluding all the deity and miracles and turning water into wine and things like that, then certainly it sounds a lot more plausible and sounds more like, yeah, if he's just described as a normal person, then sure, why not?
Okay, so from what I'm trying to understand your views here. So all the supernatural claims that are made throughout the Gospels and the miracles and all those things, those tend to cause you to doubt the existence of a historical Jesus. Am I right here in how I'm representing you?
The claims of the miracles and other supernatural events are definitely what I doubt. I do know that, like, there's an illusionist named Chris Angel, very recently did a demonstration of walking on water, and he's done some other fantastic things. See, the problem is, how can I rule out that some of these miracles that were claimed and attributed to him aren't just illusions? And that's where the doubt comes from.
Okay. So do you have this same sort of, like, I want to make sure I'm representing you right here, but is this same sort of like absence of belief in the historical? Do you have an absence of belief in the historical Jesus, or are you just not sure? Like, what if someone says
those two would be almost the same thing. I don't have a position on it because it's not. I don't have a dog in that fight, so to speak. I'm not out there debating that point. So I really haven't done much research into it. I'm somebody who doesn't know very much about that. It's not an area that I've spent much time studying.
Okay, so
it's hard for me to give you a straight answer on it.
No. You don't have to have all the answers. I appreciate your honesty. So, do you have the same sort of, like, absence of belief regarding, let's say, other figures in ancient history, such as like an Alexander the Great or Cleopatra or Julius Caesar? The list could go on and on. Do you have is it the same absence of belief?
It depends. So there's concern about, I think, is it Plato or Socrates? There's been question about whether one of them is actually real, and that one may have made up the other. So there's new information that's come up that's cast some doubt on that. When I see that there's the majority of historians seem to be in favor of Cleopatra actually existing, and there is evidence that seems to be coming from multiple sources on it that all kind of converge consistently, then that definitely gives it a lot more credibility. Again, I have to say I can't get 100% behind those because they're in history, and who wrote those things down? Were they people who had some motives to depict those people not as they really were? And these kind of things happen because people are people, and they will often cover one thing and may exaggerate certain points, and we don't actually get an accurate picture. We have a general idea, the general idea that Jesus was a person walking around and interacting with people certainly seems a lot more plausible than the one where he's turning water into wine, because there's that miracle aspect. So, you know, it's with history, I see it as a general kind of overview of what probably happened. That's how I take history.
So would you say, yeah, I understand a lot where you're coming from. So would you say, let's just fast forward a lot quicker into history here, or a lot more into the present. So let's say someone like trying to think of someone, let's go with like a George Washington, you know, the American. Would you say he existed, or do you have like that same absence of belief? Like, where are you on the existence
he's
of
much more he's much more contemporary, and there seems to be a lot more evidence that's consistent coming from a lot of different sources that he existed. And there's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there's been some misinformation spread about him too, but my level of confidence in the claims of his existence are much higher than people further back in history. And the further back in history we go, the less confidence my view on it is.
So is there anyone in like ancient history that you would say you confidently believed existed? Or is there like a list, or I don't know?
Well, I think significantly people who are there's more widespread knowledge of them. Someone like Genghis Khan, for example, has there's documentation of him being all over the place, and he's known for that, and that's what he did. And there's a part where China was building the wall, and he went around the wall because it hadn't been completed yet instead of going through it. Totally defeat the purpose of the wall. He was there a bit too early, and then he went and took over China. But then he conquered China, and then he became Chinese because he was overwhelmed by the size of the population. So yeah, he got the power, but he couldn't change it to him. He had to stay the way it was. So did he really win, right? So there could be distortions with all of this too. Maybe he didn't go around the wall. Maybe he found an opening because something broke down because it wasn't built as well as it should have been. And but the person who did it didn't want to get in trouble, so a different story was told. I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities, right? So, yeah, am I confident? I have a higher confidence value of the more famous people existing for sure, but there needs to be enough evidence as well to. There's a number of factors involved in determining what my confidence level would be, and that's just me only. This doesn't necessarily represent what other atheists are like. Me as an atheist, all these other characteristics we're talking about, of course, don't really have very much to do with atheism, if anything at all. And there are other people who study history who will be more informed on these historic people, and be able to put a much higher confidence value on the accuracy of what's written about them.
Okay. One thing I do want to say, in defense of the wall, it is a nice tourist attraction now. I've never been there, but at least there isn't that purpose for the Great Wall of China.
They can see it from the moon.
But what if the Earth's flat and the moon is just a light?
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! This is a topic for another day.
And that was when I show you all my flat Earth beliefs, and
oh boy!
That is obviously a joke for anyone who doesn't know me. I do not believe that the Earth is flat. So, well,
one of the jokes that comes up a lot about flat earthers, they've got locations all around the globe.
Oh my! So one more question here about Christianity. I appreciate you just letting me ask you all these questions.
Oh, yeah.
What would convince you if there is anything that would convince you that Christianity is true.
Well, I'll go back to my other challenge, the one that you posted up earlier, because to me, Christianity, what is central and extreme, and you can't do without it with Christianity, is God.
Okay.
Without God, do you have Christianity?
Okay. So
he's an integral part of it, I think.
I mean, no God, no Christianity. I do understand that.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, you need to have a supernatural force for there to be a resurrection from the dead.
Yeah.
So let's just say you could time travel back to 2,000 years ago, and you were there following Jesus around. You watch him die. You watch him get crucified and die. And then you see him come out of the tomb a few days later and with the holes in his wrists and the things like that. Would that convince you that Christianity is true if you saw?
It probably would. It probably would. Of course, I would be very interested in looking at the tomb and seeing what's going on. I'd want to know for sure that he wasn't just some guy in a coma. But if he's doing other things, right? So that this is an idea that's come up. He was in a coma for 2 or 3 days or however long it was. So there's 'cause people do get injuries, right? And people can survive through these kinds of things, especially if they're healthy. And if he's been walking around a lot, he's probably pretty healthy for the time, compared to other people who probably didn't go around as much. I don't know. So I would probably be very curious, and my guess is I'd probably be annoying some people. So yeah, if I could see it firsthand, that would probably help a lot. Okay.
So last question here before we move on to the fun, happy part where we don't have all these serious questions. So if Christianity is, let's just say that I'm right here, would you become a Christian if Christianity is true?
I don't know. I probably would not, because there are some passages in the Bible that I have great concerns about. One of them is that, and I forget where it is, but I could look it up afterwards if you needed me to. But there's something about women cannot talk, like I think in a church or somewhere.
Yeah, 1 Timothy 2.
Unless, okay, you know this. I'm not surprised you know this. Actually, it's a good sign, given what your position with the work you do. But that women can't speak unless a man speaks, gives them permission to speak. And there's things like this that don't sit well with me. So I have objections to those specific things, and because they are part of Christianity, I don't like to associate myself with ideas that are promoting with the promotion of bad ideas and things like that. To me, it's problematic. There's another one that comes up where there's an edict to kill non-believers. And a lot of people say, oh, that's Old Testament. It doesn't apply now in New Testament. So, there's different things coming up. So these kinds of things I feel would definitely need to be resolved, and other issues like it, before I could embrace it and become a Christian.
Okay. I do want to say that passage you're talking about in 1 Timothy, I did do an interview with Nick Quine, who's working on getting a doctorate in New Testament theology, and he talked about this passage and gave a very good explanation. If you're curious, check that out. But let's move on.
Send me a link later. Yeah, maybe put a link in the description of this video in case the audience wants to look at it too. Yeah.
What I'll do is when you are talking at some point, I'll just pop it in the live chat. But so let's move on. We've been talking about issues relating to the truth of Christianity.
The other passage I was talking about, putting non-believers to death, is 2 Chronicles 15:13. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just in case you wanted to look it up.
No, okay. I appreciate it. So let's move on here. Last part of this conversation today, which I've greatly enjoyed. How do you think, because you're such a friendly guy. Like, I remember when you debated me on literally 0 seconds.
So are you, it's like.
You're so sweet. So you debated me on literally like 0 seconds notice, because the person I was supposed to debate was just like, didn't show up for some reason. And it was one of the most pleasant conversations I've had, because you're just such a funny guy. Like, we can disagree on these things, but like you don't get angry, and I hope I don't get angry. And so
Do you think that's the way?
Angry, so. Yeah.
Do you think that's the way Christian and atheist dialogue should be? We're not like just going at each other's throats, but we're just trying to be like friendly and then talk about the issues.
So first, most important, well, I like to say, I like to characterize that debate experience we had, that we got into a debate and a conversation broke out. That's because that's exactly what happened, like you said. The most important thing to remember, I think, is that I think a genuine friendship doesn't require imposing one's beliefs on their friends. So it's, as long as you have this in mind, you can easily be friends with anybody. It's not a problem. So the dialogue between atheists and Christians, I think it's a mistake to look at it as adversarial in nature. We're all neighbors. We're all sharing the planet. We all need to get along. And so it's very helpful if we can have dialogue. And I think one of the most important things is to be able to talk about even the most contentious issues, like we discussed abortion earlier and we discussed Nazis. Both of those are contentious issues. And there was no argument. There was no fight. It was quite calm and cool-headed, and there's no problem with it. Like we obviously have different views on it, but I think if people can have this, what I call the free exchange of ideas, is a phrase that I've been trying to get out there. And so this is why I'm so happy to be on your show today, because that's exactly what this is, the free exchange of ideas. I see, although you're asking most of the questions, it's important because if we understand each other better, we can work together for a better future for everybody. That potential is always there in a much stronger way if we can do that. Where there's a problem, I guess, and some people get very much afraid of it, and they'll say, oh, but what if it escalates to violence? Well, then it's not a discussion anymore. And it becomes a matter for the police or even the military in some cases, depending on how bad it gets and who's doing the talking. But the idea is, as soon as somebody escalates to violence, those people are trying to oppress. They're not trying to have free and open dialogue anymore. And that's the problem. So what you're going for is the opposite of that. You're going for the free exchange of ideas. And that's so important. If we can discuss contentious issues and we can argue, even vehemently argue about it, that's still okay. As long as we don't escalate to acts of violence, it's fine.
Okay.
And most progress can be had from this, I think. And we look in history where people have had the strongest disagreements very often. We've also, the outcome has also led to the greatest progress for us as a species. Yeah,
a lot of good stuff there. Last question here before we start to wrap things up. What do you think that Christians miss? Like, what do Christians in your experience dialoguing and interacting with atheists, what do Christians misunderstand typically about atheists or atheist beliefs or things like that? What's just one or two of the most common misconceptions that you see?
One of the most common ones is that atheists all believe in science, and there are many atheists who aren't even educated in science. And there are, because any kind of scientific idea like theory of evolution or the Big Bang or different things like that, these are scientific endeavors. They are incidental to atheism. And so one of the common things that I find comes up, and that's just one example. So one of the most common things I find comes up is that a lot of assumptions are made about atheists being more than just, atheism being more than just not believing in deities. And that is unfortunate, because I think the most important thing to remember is that it's not a position when I say I don't believe something. It's just it's a psychological state of not believing. If I'm not taking a position for or against the idea, and so that's it. So then that's where there seems to be assumptions made that there's a bunch of positions attached to it. And I think, it comes from people having experience dealing with atheists who do hold some pretty strong positions, and then assuming that all atheists are like that. And it's just a matter of meeting more atheists who aren't like that before this starts to become more clear. And the same thing with Christians. I've noticed that there are Christians with all sorts of different views. Look at all the different denominations, right? So the same thing probably happens with Christianity, I assume.
Okay. Funny comment here. Carl says this is last question number 7. That's my guy, Carl. I do say last question a lot, so I will.
Last question number 7.
That's probably about
that's
right.
Fantastic.
That's probably right. So we'll start to wrap things up here. Any thoughts, questions, deep, dark secrets, anything you want to say before we wrap things up here?
Well, thank you to everybody who's in the chat. You're saying there's a lot of people have showed up, which is great. And I recognize some of the names, such as Critical Cripple and Amiga Nuts, and a little bit of Tea in Danish and some others. So I'm grateful that you and everybody else in the chat has come here and everybody watching. Did you say there were some questions from the audience?
I don't think there were. There's one question about a book that I might write, and that is a mystery. I will, if I do have details on that, I will announce them. As of now, there's nothing to disclose. But I mean, there's nothing really, you know, just random stuff. Nothing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I enjoy doing some writing as a hobby as well. So.
Yeah, I saw you're like working on a science fiction book. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's 250 species in it, and that's I've got more than half of them documented so far. I've been working on this on my spare time throughout my life, and there's going to be a lot of different alien worlds in it, and there's some conflicts that get larger than our entire universe, and there's one species that has more than 2 million years of technological advancement in its history. We're what, maybe 20,000 years comparatively. So they're exploring entire universes, and there's a number of different planets. Some of them have a very strong religious cultures on them, and others are completely not. But this is not the focus of the book. The focus is more other issues, but those things are part of the characters and whatnot. So creating all of these things is quite a lot of work, and it's something I enjoy very much, because you get off on tangents, and the beauty of creative writing is that you can continue to explore those tangents and come off on even more tangents from them. And if something's out of place, you just put it onto another species history or something. It's great. So yeah, I'm having some fun with that. And the thing about writing is even creative writing, if you want to try to do some research in a related area to make sure you've got understanding that they come across as credible, and that is probably one of the harder parts of it. And it's also, if you're covering a lot of different topics, you get to study a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you kind of end up quite a lot. If I have more, ability, make a lot more progress on it.
Okay.
So your interest sounds like.
Can you hear me?
You have an interest in mystery.
I think you froze everything. I think we're good now, though.
No. Okay. You have an interest in writing a mystery novel of some sort, is what you're saying?
No. I must have made a mistake. I don't know. Somehow, like,
I heard the word mystery earlier, so.
I have no idea. Well, that is not in my. That'd be fun.
Okay.
Not any sort of a plan at the moment.
Okay.
Great. This has been a great conversation. For people who do not know who you are, I'll give you a chance to just plug anything that you want. If people want to learn more about you, how do they find you?
Okay. I'm Randolf Richardson. I'm the founding president of the Canadian Atheists, and you can reach us at canadianatheists.ca, and that's our logo. And if you want to reach me elsewhere, my YouTube channel is youtube.com/Randolf Richardson. That's Randolph spelled with an F, not PH. And I'm also, you can find me in other places, such as my website at randolphrichardson.com. So it was just such a delight to talk with you today, Zach. Thank you very much. And I do hope that your ministry is going very well.
Yeah. I appreciate it. It's been going good. I appreciate you for joining me, Randolph. It's always fun to talk to you. If you start your show stuff, I will always be honored to come on. Appreciate you answering all my questions. For people who are new here, welcome to Adherent Apologetics. I encourage you to subscribe. We talk to all kinds of people about the existence of God, the question of Christianity, and all kinds of fun stuff. It's a good channel. You can follow us on Twitter at AA Apologetics. You can search for Adherent Apologetics on Instagram, Facebook, and now TikTok, which I do not know why I made a TikTok, but I do have a TikTok now.
Congratulations.
And if you want to support Adherent Apologetics, you can do so at patreon.com/Adherent Apologetics. We're trying to reach part-time funding. We're almost at 50%, so you can pledge as little as $1 a month, and it goes a long ways. But that's it for everyone. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you, Randolph. Thank you for joining me. It was a great conversation.
Look forward to talking with you again. Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, of course. All right, everyone. See you next time. Blessings.